Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, the show that brings you weekly advice and news at the beginning of every weekend. Introducing first your hosts, Mack, Mark, and Landon. Your host with the most is back. So glad to have my job back. This is episode 46 of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, and wherever you are and however you may be listening, we want to thank you for making us a part of your day, Saturday, March 30th. And we're talking tight ends today, not just Mark's finely toned buttocks, but we're talking tight ends, the position, 2019, the way too early top 10 list. I got the boys with me. I'm happy to have my spot back. Boys, what has been going on?
Today I drove and tested some drivers. I'm golfing. As you know, we're golfers here. So I went and tested some tailor-made drivers. Had some fun doing that. I've been looking after some enormous Great Danes as a little side gig for a friend. So I've been doing that as well. And yeah, life is good, my friend. How you doing, Marky?
Good. Great. Great Danes. Are you talking about people from Denmark, or the docile dog breed? Because both are a worthy addition to a household.
The docile dog breed.
Oh, of course. I've been awesome as well. I just walked my pup. He's not a Great Dane. He's a sheepadoodle. And he's the best. So life is really good too.
You haven't met
hear
my
a dog
yet.
bark in the background, it is Tilly.
Yeah, well, hopefully he keeps it down out there. It's going to come a certain point where he's going to settle. But yeah, things are fantastic. Excited to talk some tight ends. There has been some really interesting news about certain tight ends in the league recently, including some shattering news that we'll get into, which you probably already heard of.
Mm-hmm. You can keep up with the show on Instagram at the Saturday Morning Snap, and you can also keep up with us on Twitter. I run the main account at SMS_fantasy, and then we got Landon at Landon_SMS and Mark at MarkDraft_SMS. This episode comes at a fitting time. We've got one of the best, if not the best, I think widely talked about or respected as the best tight end of all time, Rob Gronkowski, retiring from the NFL after 9 pretty solid seasons with a couple notable ones to boot. So are you guys surprised by this, or do you think that this was just inevitable and it was just, we had to just wait and see?
For me, I thought it was going to happen last year. There's rumors of New England trying to trade him, but he told
Don't forget about the rumors of the WWE.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot about those.
Yeah.
They were going to try to trade him to Buffalo, but he refused. He's not going to play in Buffalo, kind of what Antonio Brown did. And it's fitting for him to go out on top. And he wasn't himself last season. He came up big in the Super Bowl, and he seems to always do that in the playoffs. So yeah, it's been great being involved in fantasy in the Rob Gronkowski era. What are your thoughts, Mark, on this?
Well, hold on. But by the way, what is Buffalo thinking, trying to acquire all of these soon to retire, washed up players? I'm not saying Gronk's washed up, but they're trying to get Antonio Brown, end of his career. Rumors of Gronk, you remember the Terrell Owens days, went to spend one last season in Buffalo. Do you just go to Buffalo to die?
It's like in Madden. It's like a Madden team where you're not playing in franchise mode, but just season mode.
You know what?
Hit reset at next February, and we'll try again.
Well, yeah.
You make a good point, Mac, but it is about putting kind of butts in those seats too, and big names tend to do that, and I guess maybe that's what Buffalo's thinking.
Yeah, I thought the Antonio Brown thing was so funny. Like, they had a deal ready to go, and then Rappaport was like, "Oh, spoke too soon. AB busted it up."
Yeah, gone.
I'm not surprised to see that Gronk did the same thing if the rumors are true. But I mean, if we take a look back on Gronk's career, and I'll let Mark kind of go on that because I stole his thunder. But Mark, 2011. Gronk really kind of burst out. He did have a pretty good rookie season in 2010, but 2011 was the best the best season of his career. 17 touchdowns, 90 receptions for 1,327 yards. I mean, that is like top 5, top 3 wide receiver numbers. Not 17 touchdowns, but I mean, that's a great season for a wide receiver. But as a tight end, like, that guy broke the league for the early 2010s to 2015. So give us your thoughts on Gronk at the beginning of his career and sort of what he's been like the last few years in comparison.
I think fantasy-wise, undeniably, just the most relevant tight end of the last decade. He is enigmatic. He is enormously productive as a pass catcher, but just what those stats don't even show is his blocking ability and his sportsmanship. Like, he's just a super well-rounded player in an era where tight ends are less on the forefront than so many star wide receivers. But he's always been capable to put up those numbers and and remain relevant. Gotta love Gronkowski for lots of reasons, and I think he kind of set an unfair standard for what teams are going to look for when they draft tight ends coming into the league now.
I remember when Rob Gronkowski was a first-round pick, and everyone thought, "Oh my God, you're crazy for taking Gronk, like, 8th or 9th or 10th overall," and he gave you exactly what you paid up for. But the biggest knock on Gronk, I guess, would be his health. In 9 seasons, only played... he played 16 games in 2 seasons. Those were his first 2 seasons in 2010 and 2011. Since then, never played a full season. Really, plagued by injuries at times. And the last couple years have been sort of the prime example of that. But I think went out on top, had an amazing career. There's going to be a huge vacancy that I don't think any of these 3 tight ends at the top right now, who we'll talk about soon, can fill. But yeah, he'll certainly be missed. Football fans and fantasy players everywhere.
For sure. Where do you think his now career path goes? I know we joked WWE. Do you think that's realistic? Do you think he tries to do some movies? Do you think he just kind of goes into the sunset and relaxes and his hot girlfriend every night?
He's gonna do something. Like, he's got such a good entertainment presence. I could see him pursuing the wrestling thing. Probably not right away, but maybe eventually. But he'll get bored and have to do something, or maybe we'll see the not so uncommon comeback.
Yeah, he might unretire.
Takes a year off, tries announcing, and then comes back.
Boy, if you don't get...
Mark, where do you see Gronk's career going right now?
I could see him being maybe some kind of talk show host with maybe a very ironic partner in crime, almost like a co-hosted Martha Stewart type show where he's just this big, almost threatening guy, but teaching people about pruning and self-care.
Are you saying he's going to be the next Michael Strahan?
Yeah, I could see him doing that. I could see him really being that future, maybe not a successor to Michael Strahan, but a competitor in the industry. I think he's going to be an entertainment personality on some kind of talk show.
All right, so let's start talking tight ends in the current 2019 season. So, what's your number one tight end, Mack? Who's your top target? Or different? Those are different questions. Who's your number one rated tight end in 2019?
For 2019, my number one rated tight end is Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs. I just think with the possibility of, Kareem Hunt is gone, but with the possibility too of Tyreek Hill missing time due to suspension, we didn't really talk about that, but he is potentially facing a suspension next year or in the future time. I think Travis Kelce could see a huge boost. So even though I love Zach Ertz and George Kittle, I think Kelce, just because of the necessity he'll have to be used at in order for them to be successful, I think he's going to have an uptick in targets, and that just means more production. And Kansas City's offense is pretty darn good, so a lot of red zone upside with him as well.
I got Zach Ertz. It's obviously in the same discussion anytime that Kelsey's name is brought up, but I just think he is a fabulous all-around player. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to have quite the year Kelsey's going to have, but they'll be neck and neck for sure. Love both those guys, but I got Ertz as number one this year.
So to follow up, I want, and I've got Travis Kelce number one as well. But my tight end target this year, so guys, if I'm not going to take one of the top three, my target I seem to end up in every draft is OJ Howard, based on where he's going in drafts, where he's, where I have him ranked, where I see that offense in Tampa Bay going this year with Bruce Arians at the helm. And I know that Bruce hasn't had a tight end that is relevant in his offenses, but they're going to be a high-powered offense, in my opinion, and I think it's still going to go to OJ. We know Jameis likes him. I know they're going to try to commit to Jameis this year, and they're not going to switch back and forth. They don't have Fitzmagic anymore to do that with, so I think OJ is going to highly benefit from that. What about you guys?
He's
Go ahead,
one of
Mark.
those guys. OJ is one of those dudes who is compared to Gronk in stature and play style. He's an excellent blocker. He is such a hard guy to guard. It's a total mismatch, and I think you're on point right there saying that he's a guy worth targeting, and he'll be a top 5 tight end. Even though there's quite a few other weapons in Tampa Bay there, you're right. Jameis does love his tight ends.
Do you have a different target you've seen in your mock draft so far, and who you might target in your fantasy leagues?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty close battle again between these guys here, but I think Evan Ingram for me would be the top target. Now that OBJ isn't going to be the clear number one in New York, I think there's plenty of room for Ingram to have a massive season. He will get so many targets.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer too. Just where he's going in drafts right now, what he's going to give to you with a depleted offense. I don't think Golden Tate coming into that offense is going to really make a huge difference. I think there's the chemistry there. If Eli's still there, if Dwayne Haskins is there for a majority of the season, I still think Evan Ingram's going to be a guy he goes to. So I really, really like Evan Ingram as well. I think I would jump on that train with you.
Do either of you have a sleeper tight end that maybe our listeners might not know about or might not expect to have in our top 10, or who you might have forgotten about this year, or anyone kind of a long shot that could break into a relevant role in that position?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think once you get outside the top 3, there is just a massive tier break there, and you're going to have to pay up for guys that probably aren't worth it. So I think it's just worth waiting it out. Just for reference, Travis Kelce's going 20th off the board on average. Zach Ertz at 26th, George Kittle at 33rd. So George Kittle is the end of the top tier break, and that's a very, very general consensus amongst most people that play fantasy. But George Kittle, last guy, 308. Then you don't see another tight end till 504, so about 2 rounds later, and that's Eric Ebron. I still like Ebron going into the season, but I don't think he's worth the price of a 5th round when I'm looking at other guys like Cooper Kupp, Jarvis Landry, Tyler Boyd, Deshaun Watson, Tevin Coleman. I think those are guys I would rather have on my team than Eric Ebron. So I would definitely wait. And when you get down into, I'm typically looking, if I'm waiting like 8th, 9th, 10th round, guys like Jared Cook, Vance McDonald, I think have a lot of upside in comparison to the 5-round price, a boost that I'll have to pay to get Eric Ebron, even though he's in a tier lower. Because I still think that at the end of the year, Vance McDonald and Eric Ebron could have very similar seasons. Like the discrepancy between their year-end finishes isn't going to be as big as the difference between a guy like Jarvis Landry and Eric Ebron. So that's why I would wait.
So you brought up a really good point, Mac, and I want to touch on this. Maybe we'll touch on it when we actually do our draft, but with position scarcity at the tight end spot, and you have to start one, and there's not very many good ones, where Kelsey, Ertz, and Kittle really performed as a wide receiver when you look at end of season rankings. And that is such a value at that position to just plug and play those guys, where after that tier break of those top 3, you're almost streaming week to week. Can you start a Jared Cook, Evan Ingram week to week? You don't want to. You want to start them in good matchups where the top 3, you're a plug and play. You're going to play them in almost every matchup no matter what. And you don't want to miss out those big games. And it's going to be hard to predict the big games that OJ Howard has. And if he lets you down a couple weeks in a row, you're not going to feel that confidence in doing that. So for us, I don't know really what my opinion is yet, but in your mock drafts that you've been doing, do you feel like you need to have one of those top 3 tight ends? And as a reference, and what happened to Gronk last year, he was the first tight end taken off the board, and he busted last year, and he really burned people. So we don't want that to happen to one of these 3, but it's possible to happen. Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the whole tight end situation? Taking one early, taking one in the top 2-3 rounds.
I think in this day and age, those guys are such game changers. Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz are most likely going to be players that are on the championship teams. As far as distributing the load across an entire team, it really the teams that are going to win it are the most complete. And you're right about after that top 3 just being a complete tier shift. So you better hope for some other miracles if you're facing guys that have any one of those 3 players and you don't have any of them. Because frankly, they were difference makers this year. And I think they'll continue to be so.
Like, do you think that Travis Kelce is going to have a better season than Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Joe Mixon?
No.
Total fantasy points. Right. So he's going in the middle of those guys. He's going after AB and Joe Mixon and one spot before Juju Smith-Schuster. I just think the price for Travis Kelce is too high. And so I would rather have other players that are more valuable. I understand position scarcity, but that's not to say I couldn't get a very similar top tier tight end a round later with George Kittle.
Well, that's the thing. Would you rather have a guy like Zach Ertz or Stephon Diggs?
I think Stephon Diggs is being drafted. No, Stephon Diggs is at the 310 right now for ADP. Zach Ertz is the 302. So
right.
I mean,
I think that's a little rich for my blood. Any one of those 3 tight ends going as high as they are is rich when you can get a player like you said, OJ Howard or Evan Ingram in 2 rounds later.
Yeah, and I think you have a better chance of streaming tight ends in good matchups going at the 9th or 10th round, or even guys you pick up off waivers. You have a better chance of getting a tight end 1 performance that way than spending up. The only way that I would have one of these players on my team is if I played in a keeper league and I've just sort of like grandfathered them onto my team. Like this year, I'm keeping Zach Ertz as a 5th round pick, and I've had him since he was an 8th round pick. So that's the only situation, or in Dynasty, obviously, but that's the only situations where I would have him at the current price. If I'm going in, like just the beginning of the 3rd round for Zach Ertz is just, I love him. He's a great player, and he was amazing. He was my fantasy MVP last year, but I can't pay that for him when I could get T.Y. Hilton or Dalvin Cook or Keenan Allen or Adam Thielen on my team. I would rather have those players than to spend up on Zach Ertz. But that's why you do mock drafts too, right? You need to figure out, I need to go do 3 or 4 or 5 mock drafts and see what my team looks like with one of these top tier tight ends, and see how it affects the later part of my draft. And if you don't mind it, then maybe you roll with it. But I think you need to put some practice in too.
That's it. And you don't have to be a fantasy expert to get out there and do 5 mock drafts. It takes an hour. You gotta, you gotta find out, what's good for you, what your preferences are. That's true. Yeah, that's a really good point that I just think doesn't get brought up enough on this show. Is just, all a mock draft is you going up against a bots that take the mathematics of where these players are getting placed at, and it's, if nothing else, the only way to plan for your league.
Yeah, and you could do them on Yahoo and play, or actually mock against other players and other people, as long as everyone takes it seriously. It does take a lot longer for doing those type of drafts, but it's still fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to move us to our top 10 here. We're going to go down the list. We're going to give you our consensus top 10, and we'll sort of speak on some guys that we haven't talked about yet. Coming at number 1 consensus for the 3 of us is Travis Kelce. Landon and myself have him at number 1, Mark at number 2. And then number 2 is Zach Ertz. Mark has him number 1, Landon 2, myself 3, and then George Kittle is our 3rd. I have him at 2. Mark and Landon both have him at 3. So the top 3, I don't think need to be talked about anymore. They are the tried and true options for this year. I would feel great having all 3 of them. Well, not all 3 of them, any 3 of them on my team. And if you have all 3 of them on your team, that's just a complete waste. But outside of that, there's a lot of discrepancy, a lot of variation in our rankings. And I think that's a good thing, because there's cases to be made for lots of different guys. Coming in at number 4, combined ranking of 14, is OJ Howard. Now, Mark and Landon have OJ Howard at number 4. I have him at number 6. So I want you guys to talk about why you like OJ Howard at number 4, and then I'll give you some reasons why I think he's a little bit further down.
You can take this one, Mark.
Jameis loves his tight ends, as we've already mentioned. He could be as targeted as Mike Evans in any given game, depending on how healthy he stays. We know that he is a proven athlete. He's a really hard guy to cover, and last year he showed some real big breakout runs too. So I think just he has a lot of upside to him, and he could be a bit of a steal depending on what's happening in certain draft boards. He's a Buccaneer, and that's a really gunslinging kind of offense, and I think he's going to get the ball a lot. What do you think, Lando?
Yeah, I concur. Mac, how come you got him a little bit lower? Yeah.
Well, so for me, I'm just looking at the guys that I would prefer to have ahead of him. And
yeah, discuss about those guys.
Yeah, so I just think I've said it before with Evan Ingram, Odell Beckham Jr. leaving town, I think there's a lot of targets to go around now. There's a huge a command of attention lost in the offense, and it needs to go somewhere. And I think Evan Ingram's just going to be that default safety target, because we saw a glimpse of that a season and a bit ago when Sterling Shepard was out with, I think it was a hamstring injury. Odell Beckham Jr. had gone down really early with that gruesome ankle injury, and Eli just had like no one to throw to, and it just defaulted to Evan Ingram in his rookie season, and he was fantastic. Like, he was phenomenal. So I think if that's indicative of the future or what it could be, and he just gets hyper targeted, I would have to put him just for volume's sake ahead of Howard. And then I'm going to take a similar approach to what you guys said about about OJ Howard with Eric Ebron. Andrew Luck loves his Eric Ebron James.
LeBron James.
Andrew Luck, in what was an amazing comeback season last year, really utilized his tight ends. I mean, you look at Ebron was really the benefactor of Jack Baby Hands Doyle missing some time. Right?
Touchdowns. He had a ton of touchdowns this past year.
He was a red zone machine, but I just think like Andrew Luck having two tight ends that are great in that offense and really establish a connection with Eric Ebron, I have to say that that's going to continue. So for me personally, I think that Eric Ebron is a better player than OJ Howard. I think that Andrew Luck is a better quarterback than Jameis Winston, and therefore I'm going to have to put Ebron ahead of Howard. Now, I do think that Howard's athleticism and hopefully what Bruce Arians can do with that offense will give him a boost at the tight end position, but I don't think he warrants the number 4 ranking in my rankings. But that's not to say that that couldn't happen, right? Because outside of the top 3, it really is fair game for pretty much everybody to make that jump.
Yeah. Sounds pretty logical. I like that. And you're right, with the splits with Odell Beckham Jr. out of the lineup in New York, Evan Ingram saw a huge increase in targets and receptions. And as long as his third year in the league, this should be pretty good for a breakout. Tight ends normally seem to do that anyways. He's just kind of the outlier where he broke out his rookie season. He was hurt most of last season, but when he did play, he did okay. So yeah, I think as long as his health, and I do somewhat worry about the offense in New York, but that's no one's worried about Saquon Barkley, and I don't think we need to worry about Evan Ingram too much either.
No. Evan Ingram comes in at number 5. We basically had him at 5, 6, and 5. And sorry, is that right? 5, 6, and 4. 5, 6, and 4. I had him at 4. So he comes in at 5. At number 6, we have Jared Cook. Now, you guys are a little bit more higher on Cook than I am. Mark at 5, Landon 6, myself at 8. I'll start off by saying my position on Jared Cook. I think that him going to a very high-powered offense like New Orleans is a great thing for him. He was great last year in Oakland for the opposite reasons. There was just really no one to throw to, and he stepped up and filled that role for a very struggling offense. Now he goes to an offense that is the exact opposite. It's a team that's been fighting for a Super Bowl berth for the last 2 seasons. Probably should have got there, got ripped off. It is what it is. We've seen Drew Brees have success with tight ends in the past, and then we've had guys in the system where we thought they could succeed and they didn't, a la Colby Fleener, for example. So how do you envision Cook coming into this offense? Because I have some doubts, but I think he'll be good enough to be a top 10 option and just not, in that top 5 consideration just yet. So, give us your thoughts.
I think the Saints offense is a perfect landing spot for Jared Cook. As we know, they love to spread the ball around in that offense. But for a team that's going to come back hungry and angry, I think they're going to do whatever it takes, and they're going to put up tons of points all season long, just as they did last year. He's just another weapon in an otherwise very dangerous system. If he could make points on Oakland's offense, I just can't imagine what it's going to be like with that much more dialed of a system.
Yeah, I've been wavering a little bit on Jared Cook. I totally thought and agreed with what Mark just said. Mac, I've been talking to you a little bit about Jared Cook and how I'm somewhat concerned, but like you said, we've bought into the tight ends. We've been looking for that Jimmy Graham replacement in New Orleans for years, and we haven't gotten it yet. Maybe this is it. Jared Cook's been around. He played in Green Bay. Obviously, he was a breakout in Oakland. It's he also disappears for some games, and he might do the exact same thing in New Orleans. So he's a streamer. I do have him ranked pretty high, but for the reasons Mark gave, it just in the offense together, I think he's going to be a safe-ish. He's going to be a tight end you're going to feel okay having on your team.
Yeah, and the nice thing is he doesn't cost you a whole lot right now. If I just scroll down here, Jared Cook is being drafted the first pick of the 9th round. So you're really not investing a whole lot of draft capital to have him on your team. That's for average leagues. He might go earlier in some, later in some. So you just never know. But I think at the 9th round, it's not a whole lot to gamble. Eric Ebron coming in at consensus number 7. Again, I have him number 5. Mark at number 9, and Landon at number 10. So there's a huge difference there. I'm kind of pulling Eric Ebron up a little bit. We've talked enough about him, but at number 8, we have a guy that didn't play football last year. Well, if you count the couple series he played in the playoff game, we've got Hunter Henry of the Chargers. I'm just going to pass this one to you guys because you guys have him at 7 and 8. I have him at 10. So give us your thoughts on Hunter Henry for next year.
So a question I was going to ask about Hunter Henry is, or ask about a tight end, is which tight end on our list do you think could actually break into the top 3? And for me, that is actually Hunter Henry. I think have
none of them.
I think the Chargers and the guys in LA have sorely missed a good tight end, and same with Phillip Rivers. And this will improve if Hunter Henry's healthy, and he's projected to be, and he should play like he played last playoffs. He should be good to go for OTAs. He will be that move tight end, that safe target. With Tyrell Williams gone, I think that those targets easily will go to Hunter Henry, and especially in the red zone. It'll take pressure off of Keenan Allen, and I think the targets are, and with Mike Williams there as well, the targets, that offense should be even better. Melvin Gordon, everyone on that team is an ownable guy in fantasy football, and I'm excited for the Chargers. And I think Henry can really break out. I'm excited for him to come out this year.
All Hunter Henry has to do is be relevant for the first half of the season, because you know that Keenan Allen's going to disappear.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. That's all they need him for.
Second half player by Keenan Allen on week 7.
I think you put that well. He's going to be a void filler in that offense, and just like you said, those Chargers look so good on paper. It's hard to envision them not getting 350 yards of offense every game.
Just out of reference, Hunter Henry is being drafted at the 7-12 position, so back of the 7th round.
A little bit early.
It's a little bit early for a guy that didn't play football last year. I think there's a lot of hype around him, but I do see the upside of him. Phillip Rivers has used his tight end religiously in the past. It's a great offense. It's a team that's knocking on, an AFC championship door. So I do like him. I don't think I'd pay the price for him right now in the 7th round.
And that's fair too. I tend to agree with you there, but depends on Henry.
Now David Njoku comes in at number 9, and Landon has him at 8. Mark has him at 6th, and I actually don't have him in my top 10. So that's a little bit. That's an interesting piece. I actually think that David Njoku is not going to be in the top 10 tight ends this year because there's just not enough mouths to feed in Cleveland. It's not a knock against him. I think he finds himself in a fantastic situation as a football player, but as a fantasy football tight end, I'm not so sure that I'd be comfortable drafting him. I think he's going to be very touchdown dependent, as all tight ends that, that finish in the top 10. Clearly, if you catch touchdowns, you're going to be, a TE1 that week. But I just don't think there's enough to go around for David Njoku. And so for that reason, I'm probably going to stay away from him this year. It's just more of a gut instinct reaction that I have. He's going at the beginning of the 7th round. So again, I just don't think I could pay the price for him. I think the Cleveland Brown hype is just far too high on him right now. And one pick earlier, I'd rather have Evan Ingram if I was looking to go tight end there. So I'd probably pivot from Njoku, but I understand the excitement around him and that team right now.
If you had to have quarterback, 2 wide receivers, tight end, and running back from either the LA Chargers or the Cleveland Browns, which group is going to score more fantasy points?
Collectively? Oh, well,
the Browns or the Chargers. You got Melvin Gordon, you got Keenan Allen, but then you got Odell Beckham and Nick Chubb. You got Phillip Rivers, or you got Baker Mayfield.
it's an interesting debate for sure. Schedule
it's
comes
close.
It's close. I don't know. I feel like you're pulling David Njoku along with a Hall of Fame level wide receiver in Odell Beckham Jr. But
But anyways,
no, it's interesting. I'm staying away from him for where you have to draft him right now and who else I could have in that similar area. I mean, I think by our rankings, you'd rather have Evan Ingram. Right now, he's being drafted on average one spot before. They're going back to back in drafts. So would you not rather have Evan Ingram at the same price as Njoku? Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think Chargers all day on that one.
All right. I like that.
Chargers. Last guy on the list, Vance McDonald, number 10. I have him at the 7. Mark does not have him ranked, and Landon at the 9. So, Mark, give us your concern for Vance McDonald and why he's not in your top 10.
Because I had to make room for someone else, whom you guys don't agree with. No, it's just maybe a player that didn't impress me enough, along with a lot of the Steelers' offensive decisions later in the year last year. Vance McDonald simply hasn't done enough for me to place him in this top 10. While, he did shred the Buccaneers defense in one memorable performance last year. That wasn't a difficult thing to do for any team.
Is it because you can't do the Vance dance? Because if you can't, Landon and I can show you.
Sorry, I make a point of not actually looking at you guys, but only listening via Spotify or Google Play or wherever it is you get your on-demand audio.
Do you wanna have a little friendly wager here, Mark? Vance McDonald versus Jason Witten, total fantasy points,
total age. Guarantee Witten's going to be far older.
Total fantasy points.
So how about we say McDonald is not going to finish the season with more than 40 points more than Witten.
40?
30.
No. I'm saying straight up. McDonald is our consensus 10. And Witten is your 10. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Sure. Let's do it.
We got it. We'll come up with the wager later, but that's on the dock.
Okay. You guys heard it. McDonald, Witten.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Thanks to everyone who stopped by. We are running a listener league for 2019. So if you'd like to be a part of that, we do have 4 open spots at the moment. the three of us are in it. We have 3 other listeners right now. Send us a message on Instagram at Saturday Morning Snap or on Twitter to any of the 3 of us, and we'll put you in our considerations for next year. We're hoping to have that league filled out for September. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say. If you guys are liking what you're hearing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you've been here with us for a while, please go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Hopefully 5 stars, but leave us some honest feedback. We'd love to know how we're doing. And we'll see you guys next week. We're into April. The Masters is coming up, which is non-football related, but it's one of the best sporting events on the planet. So I'm excited for that and excited to talk more football with you boys.
All right, take care, guys.
Love ya.
Peace.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/SaturdayMorningSnap.